Hey everyone, how's it going? Delrith here, bringing you another rapid fire review, this time for the game Mount & Blade Bannerlord's early access launch. Mount & Blade Bannerlord is made by Tale Worlds Entertainment, a Turkish game developer, and the same team who made the previous title in the franchise, Warband. Quick reminder for anyone who likes the rapid fire reviews and would like to be more involved in their process, such as playing with the community when I'm working on said games or helping with commentary and whatnot, you can head over and follow me on Twitter at AJSADelrith and, just, hey, show your support. This is the best way to know what I'm working on at the time and to learn when I'm live and, well, when to hop over and be involved throughout my play. Anyway, for anyone who doesn't know what the Mount & Blade series is, it's a kingdom building simulation game focused on medieval combat, building your way up from a nobody to a noble in a kingdom or maybe a ruler of your own through pillaging, diplomacy, or economic power. Before I get started, however, I want to address the elephant in the room, which is, why are you reviewing this in early access? And it's really simple to answer. You see, the game has been in development on again and off again for 6 or more years, I think around 8, and it has been delayed a good number of years as well, with multiple reboots of the game's development in between. It's a project that has suffered multiple setbacks and honestly for a little while looked like it might just be cancelled, and at this point with so much time having passed since the last title, with Warband having come out in 2010, I think it's entirely necessary for it to get reviewed now, and just to let y'all know if it's worth investing in or purchasing for the moment, as we have absolutely no assurances on whether or not it's going to come out of early access anytime in the immediate future. Sure, it's claimed to come out of early access in a year, but I have to be entirely skeptical since, as I said, Bannerlord itself was pushed back several years, and with the state of the game right now, I wouldn't bet on a lot of money on it coming out of early access anytime in the foreseeable future. It's also important to keep in mind that my review is going to cover my experience with the current state of the game and will be rated as it stands right now, and I'm entirely aware of the fact that the game will get better over time. I was a fan of Warband, and even I can admit that it was a dumpster fire when it first released. I know, I remember this, and that it took more than a few months for it to get to the point where you could call it stable. I also remember that it was the mods for Warband that truly made it great, and I've had dozens of people coming into my chat during my streams of this game going, "It'll get better with mods!" But if that's really who will fix it, is that even fair to use as a point? Who knows? Anyway, on to Bannerlord with starting how it looks. Graphically, I could definitely say that in the 10 years since the previous title, the game has improved over its predecessor. I can't say that it's up to par with what the best modern graphics have to offer by any means, but it's passable, and I'm alright with that. The environments of the cities are pretty pleasing to look at, with kingdom-specific locations existing, albeit 1 or 2, unique maps for each one, for you to just walk around and explore at your leisure. There's a good number of unique battlegrounds too, and a couple of villages, a few coastlines, castles, fields, snowy places, and they're all decent for what they are, but not really anything to brag about or anything that blew me away. Equipment and unit design is all fairly unique as well, with each faction having its own aesthetic of soldiers and horse armor, and the overall detail of the equipment is fairly good for the current state of the game's progress. The desert faction wears robes, turbans, and looks very Arabian, just as one example, and for another, the Vikings are decked out in furs, scale mail, and primarily run around swinging battle axes at their enemies. Honestly, I think the term that came to mind when I was looking at the visuals was just average, but it's not awful. It just seems like it would have been the top of the cream of the crop 5 years ago.
The cream of the crop! Nobody does it better!
And maybe looking a little dated, right now for a brand new title. I'm not saying it's bad, just not super flashy, as a lot of recent games like Mordhau, For Honor, and even Kingdom Come all look a bit better, but maybe that'll improve over time. Something that isn't so great, however, visually right now is the assortment of character faces and the faces of pretty much everyone in the game, with the majority of them looking extremely tiny or way too elongated. I think the word is elongated. They just don't look normal. Honestly, I've struggled to find an NPC that didn't make me laugh in dialogue when I'm speaking to them, as they just look so off, and maybe it's something that needs to be fixed. Who knows? Look at her face. Look at her face. I just noticed her face. The UI is very basic and simple, with a lot of work obviously needing to be done to it, with a lot of things buried in odd places, and it just takes a little longer to get used to. There's a bit of an overload as well when you get deeper into the game, about 20 hours or so, where buying and selling massive quantities of things becomes a pain, but again, these are all things that could be fixed further on. Sounds are fairly good in Bannerlord. Honestly, one of the best things of my whole experience, with the sounds of battle being very immersive and just the general ambience of everything being spot on. One of the most pleasing things in my playthrough was just the thunder of hundreds of horses on the battlefield at the same time, and the clash of battle as they hit the front lines. It was just oh so satisfying when I was around to hear it. Look at the number of arrows! I will say, though, that I did run into more than a dozen different assorted audio bugs with the game, such as most of my sounds cutting out when there were too many soldiers or too many sounds, and it did start to happen more frequently as the battle sizes ramped up. There were a good number of times where I just completely lost audio until the fight finished, and that sort of sucked. Other times you'd get positional audio issues and sounds coming out of the wrong places, but it never really ruined the experience for me. As far as technical stability to the game, I gotta just say that it's a pretty big disaster. I've had multiple crashes caused by different things, save corruption, battles failing to load, graphical issues, you name it, I've experienced it. A good number of the crashes are already patched, of course, and the save corruption too, for the most part, but it's still fairly bumpy and you're bound to run into problems in the current state. My suggestion, and something that I learned through pain, is that you need to be spamming F5 every chance you get and making multiple save spots. You're going to need them if, well, not if, when something bad happens and your game gets broken. No, I'm not going to save. I have a save before I got sieged. If I save during the siege, then if I lose, I literally just lose the whole game and have to start over, and I'm not okay with that. I don't think it's going to load. I think the siege is bugged. This didn't happen before. Like, this is literally from the stupid hotfix. So what's the story like in Bannerlord? Well, as with a lot of stuff, it's not really there right now. The initial story is that family members of yours get kidnapped by slavers and you run off to capture them with your brother or whatever, but end up finding a merchant who gives you a magical artifact. At this point, you forget that your family exists and run off to figure out what this magical artifact or old artifact is, and never really hear about them again, so I assume they're dead, leading you down a very tedious path of talking to nobles to figure out what you're holding and what the significance of it is. The path leads you to find out that it's this cool banner that allows you to form your own kingdom for some reason, and that you need to collect the pieces, level up your clan, and then conquer a place to call your own, resulting in you starting your own faction. Past that, nothing really works that I saw for the moment, with the conspiracy questline that supposedly exists, that I saw, I guess. It just completely broke, and for me and everyone else not being able to progress. So that's as far as we're able to get, and all that currently exists now as far as I'm aware. Try to stop the conspiracy. What? How do I... Explain how? Ah, well, there'll definitely be more in the future, I'm sure, but for the time being, if you were hoping for a solid story, yeah, you're not going to find one. Anyway, enough with all that. Let's just talk about the combat, and honestly, how it's not as great as I hoped it would have been. Do I even need to say anything about this game's combat? Look, there's been a lot of strides in the past 10 years with medieval combat. We had Chivalry with its combat, then we had what I would call an arcade version of that with For Honor, which, was pretty unique in itself, and then what I would call the pinnacle of medieval fighting combat, Mordhaus system. There's been huge strides with lots of unique ideas, and I was hoping that they'd be present, or at least that they would inspire Bannerlord's combat, but honestly, they didn't. As it stands right now, the only thing I could positively say about the combat system in Bannerlord is that archery feels pretty good. This includes horse archery and throwables, with the physics-based acceleration and impacts being spot on and definitely where they should be. Javelins that are thrown hit harder if you're riding on a horse, and the animations for soldiers being headshot and dropping to the ground are great. Everything about ranged combat is awesome and doesn't need to be changed, but melee is a completely different story. Melee just feels entirely clunky. To me, it feels very slow, uninspired, and spammy, at least in single player, with a lot of issues like ally hitboxes bogging down its potential and enjoyment. You have directional attacks and blocks. Moving your mouse in a direction before left clicking or right clicking will allow you to swing or block in that direction, up being an overhead and down being a stab, but that's about it. You do have chambers and parries, which are a bit wonky in their own regard, at least in single player, and rather unnecessary, and in the end it just seems like it entirely just comes down to weapon swing speed. Melee combat, to my experience in Bannerlord, is a matter of who can swing their weapon fastest and spam the most attacks in the shortest period of time. Blocking just doesn't give you an advantage on realistic, it doesn't stagger enemies, and seems like 9 times out of 10 it just devolves into a spam fest, and that sucks. Spam! 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 The only logic that matters is just click as fast as you can! There's really no strategy to it. It's just so dated. And I don't know, massive battles are also just a huge problem, especially with no real impact being behind your blows. The big battles are just people mushed up against each other, hardly able to do anything and just screaming constantly. And the sieges on castles quickly have their combat devolve into fuckfests with almost no ability for you to personally use your sword or shield or what have you. This sort of spam and get stun lock system definitely needs a lot of work, as 2v1s are exceptionally brutal for this reason, and I've seen even the best tier soldiers getting their asses kicked by 2 peasants simply because they never got a chance to swing and were being struck over and over and over again without being able to get out of the animation lock. Honestly, I was hoping for a more in-depth combat system like Mordhau's with solid animations, chambering being more effective, blocking, poise, and skill being more of a thing, but we got what I would call the bare minimum of medieval combat at best. Perhaps this will get improved drastically in the future with mods, or maybe the developers themselves will revolutionize how combat functions, but for right now it's definitely not a strong point of the game and isn't something I'd really write home about. I just hope it gets better. Speaking of castle sieges, one of the biggest draws of Bannerlord, well, the biggest draw that it has, I have to say, is the castle siege, and they're a totally buggy mess, underwhelming, and just need a lot of work. Disregarding the fact that combat barely functions in these, like you'll see, the actual sieging mechanics, equipment, and placements, and everything else, they also don't function very well. And both ladders are bugged. Okay, well, we can't win now. Both ladders are bugged. There have been multiple cases where my siege ladders just don't work. Things like troops not even getting on them, and troops getting stuck on them and just refusing to go over the walls and just kind of dying, or the ladders just simply disappear once they're put up and not being able to be put down again. You'd think that something so important and one of the biggest driving forces of this game's hype would have been better polished coming into early access, but it wasn't. And even after a good number of patches, these issues still persist. Just as today of writing this, I encountered multiple instances where my soldiers just refused to use ladders at all, and I don't know, it just could be so much more dynamic and impressive. I think a lot of the issues with the sieges and army battles just comes down to the general AI being absolutely brain dead in the truest of senses. The combat AI, from what I've seen, minus the tactics of like forming circles and trying to flank you with cavalry, looks almost identical from Warband, including all the stupid issues like running into walls, circling each other, and just generally being useless. A great way to see this for yourself is to simply have people on horses fight each other and watch as they just get stuck everywhere and just struggle to really kill each other in an effective manner. I also encountered more times than I can count where the enemy AI simply forgot I existed and allowed me to consistently shoot them in the head, stab them in the back, or run around behind them, and I can't say I'm surprised with how everything else, just fell apart while I was playing. It was just kind of hilarious taking advantage how stupid these soldiers are, and at one point during a siege I was able to just walk onto a wall down behind him and behind a huge group guarding doors, and then just proceed to just hit him in the back of the head and stab him over and over again without them ever trying to stop me. You do get to manually order your soldiers around with a bunch of different commands using the F1 through F4 keys, and all the F keys. Being able to issue orders like shield walls, advancing, charging, holding back, you name it, you could do it. And this definitely gives you a lot of flexibility in how everything operates, and it will definitely be used by talented players. But you still got to deal with the fact that the AI is really stupid and they're bumbling around, even if you're controlling specific tactics. Next on the list is a pretty solid leveling concept in Bannerlord, and I call it a concept as it definitely needs a lot of work and is in no way at all functional. To elaborate, players are able to focus on individual skills for different things like pole arms, two-handed bows, crossbow, etc. for combat, and utility skills like leadership, charm, roguery, so on and so forth. You have primary stats like endurance, vigor, strength, etc. Each of these being able to be boosted with levels gained, increasing the total ceiling limit of your skills and how high you're able to train them. On top of that, you also have focus skill points that you earn with some levels, things that you put into specific skills to further increase how far you can train them, with skills unlocking different little nodes of benefit as you progress further down the tree. A good example of these skills would be training in horse riding, allowing you to eventually use any bow on horseback instead of just short bows, essentially letting you use long bows instead of, short bows while fighting enemies. The problem with the skill system, however, is where your skill points and talent points and total level of your character is derived from. There is no experience per se that you can earn in battles, and your character level is entirely dependent on how far you progress your skills. It's your total skill points earned from using different things that increase your level, and eventually you will hit a wall. I think I plateaued around level 25 without the ability to progress any further because I had maximized everything I was able to do and just wasn't able to train anything higher. The stuff that I had open that I could have trained higher was just bugged and didn't earn XP, things like trading and charm, and I was just stuck at the skill level that I had. See, these extra things like trader just don't level up, as you don't get experience for the things it says you should, like, running caravans. You don't get XP for those, even though it says you should. And trading gold, for example, just gives you almost nothing. Someone in my chat mathed it out and said you'd have to trade like 1 billion gold to max out the trading skill, and that's just not feasible, so I'm just stuck on my level, not able to progress. The problem with the system doesn't end there either, with a good number of the notable skills you unlock, like any bow being able to be used on a horse, just not functioning in the slightest when you get them. Unlocking that skill does nothing for you, and it's just broken. Another example of a broken talent would be the disciplinarian in leadership or roguery, I don't remember which one, which supposedly is supposed to let you train up bandits, but that too doesn't work. It's just so broken, just so flawed and so broken, and the whole skill system just needs a complete overhaul. It's great in concept, but very poor in execution, and I don't know, they just need to replace the whole thing with an experience-based system. The kingdom building and world map part of the game functions as well as it did in Warband, and the core systems of the Empire stuff seem to be in working order after a few patches. Initially, there's this huge problem with one faction always getting out of control and just annihilating everyone else on the map after the 20-hour mark, which would ruin your save, of course, but it's since then been patched. It did ruin my save in my first playthrough, but it's fine, as there was already a save importer made for this very problem, and I was able to continue without having to regrind the skill hell from the beginning. You can, of course, run around and recruit soldiers from towns in Bannerlord, going into cities or of specific factions, and just grabbing recruits for gold. These soldiers, in turn, will gain experience and level up from battles, progressing down any tiers you can view by right-clicking them and allowing you to customize your army. Interactions are done by either directly talking to vassals and lords or going into castles, sit in cities like they were in the previous title, with brief quests like guard this caravan or kill these bandits easily being accessible and readily given from NPCs. I'm Delrith. Oh, you're king. Hey, what's up? Default intro for famous player. We'll try to make sure that this does not occur. Being able to simply enter a city this time around and just click a portrait in the upper right to get a quest instantly is great. There's no forced running around and talking to people to get objectives, which is a nice improvement. You're also able to do things like set up caravans and companions, unique NPCs you can level up and equip like partners, and they'll run off and earn money for you, something I definitely recommend that you set up as soon as you can. On top of caravans being a thing, there's now the ability to buy workshops, albeit they've been nerfed heavily, which is, they're a system where you can buy a shop, specify what goods it produces, and you'll earn money passively for just owning it. There's a loyalty, hatred, and friendship system in Bannerlord, with all of that being affected by mostly everything you do. If you behead someone's brother, they'll hate you and make it harder for you to negotiate with them if you ever need to. Likewise, if you rescue someone from a bandit assault, they'll love you. It all makes sense, and I have no complaints about it. You can, in Bannerlord, instead of forming your own faction, just go up and join with another kingdom, which will result in you being able to earn influence, shift decisions, and play the political intrigue game. This all worked well and was fairly solid in its design, and again, no complaints. I liked being able to shift the balance of power away from different nobles or use my own influence to get more cities and buildings to govern. It was all good. The personal kingdom stuff right now, I would say, is almost identical to being a vassal, with the exception of you being able to recruit nobles from other factions and build your armies that way. You're also the one making the decisions for what decrees and whatnot you want to issue instead of just voting on them, which allows you to push your kingdom into different focuses like military strength, diplomacy, or economic power. It's clear that most of the developmental focus was in this system, and it's really the most functional out of everything, so props to them to that, but it still needs a lot of work and could definitely be expanded upon, especially diplomacy in the future. There's really not much to say about it. If you played Warband, you'll understand the functions of the map and the society functions. It's pretty much all the same. As far as other things to talk about, there's multiplayer this time around, and as of right now, it's pretty fun, but entirely unbalanced and needing a lot of work, with a few of the factions just being absolutely overwhelmingly better than the others, and just resulting in certain factions getting crushed because of that. Since this is early access, I know it'll get fixed, and it is enjoyable to go be in armies and fight about, so I hope it gets sorted out fairly quickly. It was just kind of meh for the moment, and something I'm not going to be going back to anytime soon. I guess in the end, to summarize my thoughts on everything, it's that I understand what early access is, but I entirely still hate it and think that it could have been handled a lot better in the case of Bannerlord. Bannerlord has a lot of potential, don't get me wrong, but I definitely believe in the fullest that in the state that it launched in, at the price it is, which is $50, it's just far too expensive for the level of polish and massive number of missing features. If they had done what a lot of early access titles did and charged like $20 or $25 with how flawed it is, I'd be a lot more accepting and understanding. But they didn't, so I gotta go hard, especially given the sheer number of other early accesses I've played lately that were fantastic when they entered early access, like Hades. So here goes the final verdict. It's not the game that was hyped up for years, and the development issues definitely impacted this. It just feels so far from finished, and I'm going to be completely honest about it and not let nostalgia bind me from giving it a fair shake of what it is right now. Think about it. Put down your nostalgia goggles and look at it from an objective outside perspective. It's been 10 years since the previous title, and we got a lot of the exact same systems, an okay graphical overhaul, and a massively buggy launch into early access. The sieges barely function, the AI is atrocious, the combat is clunky. It's just not what we'd hoped for as fans, and I guess all we got now is hope that it gets better. I want this game to succeed. I think it's got several years of polish ahead of it, and I think that it's going to be an uphill battle to get where it needs to be. Rating this game for the current state of where it is, I'm going to have to give it a 5 out of 10. It's an extremely average game with a lot of issues, and for the price, I just can't suggest that you back it right now. It barely avoided getting a 4 out of 10, with the recent patches fixing all the major crashes and the campaign save breaks, so just keep that in mind. Personally, I think people are being way too lenient on Bannerlord. They're flaunting the early access tag after so many years in development like it just justifies the game's state as being as broken as it is, and to me, it doesn't. It'd be like slapping an early access sticker on Fallout 76 and then defending it. It's just not right. And I'm going to do what I always do and be honest with y'all when I'm reviewing games, regardless of how against the core community it is. Wait for a while, check it out in a bit, keep tabs on it. If you're really craving the unique Mount and Blade experience, just go play some heavily modded Warband. It's just still fun as hell, and there's a lot more elaborate stuff you can do, and it's just way better crafted than Bannerlord currently is. Anyway, that's going to be it for this rapid fire review. If you liked it, do me a solid and hit that like button and subscribe. And if you're already subscribed, ring the bell to get notifications on new videos in the future. Until the next video, this is Delrith, and I'll be seeing ya.